In the early years of the 1940s, a restless tension hung over the world. Europe was already plunged into conflict, a dark shadow casting over nations as World War II raged. Across the Atlantic, the United States remained on the precipice, the debate of intervention versus isolationism echoing in the halls of Congress and the streets of American cities. Amidst this backdrop, in a small town in Ohio, James O'Connor, a young man with a glint of adventure in his eyes, listened intently to the radio broadcasts, his heart racing with every news of the war. James, like many of his generation, felt a growing sense of duty, a call to defend freedom far beyond the shores of his homeland. In a diner where the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sound of clinking dishes, James and his lifelong friend Thomas Bennett sat huddled around a small table. "Did you hear Roosevelt's speech?" James asked, his voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. Thomas nodded, his expression solemn. The news from Europe was grim, but it stirred something deep within them. The following day, under a sky as blue as their aspirations, James and Thomas stood in line at the local recruitment center. The air buzzed with the nervous energy of young men, all there for the same purpose: to become pilots in the United States Army Air Forces. They shared stories, dreams, and a palpable sense of patriotism that bridged the gaps between strangers. James, the son of a World War I veteran, had grown up on tales of valor and courage. These stories now seemed like a guiding light as he embarked on his own journey. Beside him, Thomas, quieter but equally determined, remembered his father, a peaceful man who believed in fighting only to end all fighting. This war, he had told Thomas, was one where such a paradox made tragic sense. Training began with an intensity that none of the recruits were prepared for. The days were long, filled with rigorous physical exercises, classroom lessons on aerodynamics, navigation, and aircraft mechanics. The nights were short, often spent poring over flight manuals by the dim light of the barracks. Their first encounter with the aircraft they would soon learn to pilot was a moment etched in their memories. The sleek lines of the P-51 Mustangs and the robust presence of the B-17 Flying Fortresses on the airfield inspired a mix of awe and intimidation. "One day soon, we'll be up there," James whispered to Thomas, as they watched a squadron of planes ascend gracefully into the sky. The training wasn't just about mastering the mechanics of flight. It was about understanding the gravity of their future roles. Their instructor, Lieutenant Davis, a seasoned pilot himself, made sure to instill in them the realities of war. In the air, your decisions are not just about flying, they're about survival, and more importantly, they're about protecting your fellow soldiers, he often said. As the weeks turned into months, James and Thomas, along with their fellow recruits, transformed. Their bodies became leaner and stronger, their minds sharper, and their spirits more resilient. They learned to maneuver the aircraft with a skill that belied their age, their flights becoming longer, more complex, and sometimes taking them into the clutches of danger. News from Europe and the Pacific continued to filter in, each headline a stark reminder of what awaited them. In December of 1941, the attack on Pearl Harbor shook the nation, and overnight, the United States was thrust fully into the global conflict. The gravity of this event was not lost on the young pilots. It was a grim harbinger of the trials they would soon face. The chapter closes on the eve of their deployment. The air base, usually bustling with activity, was unusually quiet. The men sat in their barracks, lost in their thoughts, letters from loved ones clutched in their hands, the weight of the coming days heavy in their hearts. Outside, the stars shone brightly, a stark contrast to the darkness of the world below. In this moment of calm, they found a collective resolve, a determination to fight not just for their country, but for the very ideals that define their humanity. Tomorrow, they would fly towards the unknown, their lives forever changed. But tonight, they were just young men, standing on the precipice of history, ready to write their own stories of bravery and sacrifice in the annals of the greatest conflict the world had ever seen. The break of dawn at the airbase brought with it a symphony of sounds. The distant hum of engines warming up, the rhythmic marching of boots on the ground, and the soft murmur of pilots reviewing their flight checklists. Among these pilots, James O'Connor and Thomas Bennett stood, their faces reflecting a mix of anticipation and nervous energy. Today marked a significant milestone in their journey, their first solo flight. The skies, a canvas of soft blues and pinks, seemed to welcome them to the fraternity of the skies. James, usually brimming with confidence, felt a flutter in his stomach as he approached his aircraft, a sleek P-51 Mustang, its metallic surface gleaming in the morning sun. Thomas, calmer but equally aware of the moment's gravity, walked towards his assigned B-17, his hand running along the fuselage, feeling every rivet and seam. Lieutenant Davis's voice echoed in their minds. "Remember, gentlemen, flying is not just about skill, it's about judgment and instinct." These words were a mantra as they conducted their pre-flight inspections, a ritual that grounded them in the procedure amidst the swirling emotions. As they strapped into their cockpits, the reality of the moment hit them. They were no longer on the ground, looking up at the sky with dreams in their eyes. They were about to become part of that vast expanse. The roar of the engines drowned out their thoughts, a powerful reminder of the human ingenuity and technology that made this moment possible. James's Mustang lifted off the runway first, the aircraft responding to his touch with an agility that both thrilled and intimidated him. He felt a sense of freedom unlike anything he had ever experienced, the earth falling away as he ascended towards the clouds. Below him, he saw Thomas's B-17 beginning its own ascent, a graceful giant claiming its place in the sky. Their solo flights were not just about handling the aircraft, they were about understanding their relationship with the sky. James practiced maneuvers, each roll and dive bringing a blend of exhilaration and respect for the machine he controlled. Thomas, in his larger aircraft, focused on stability and precision, the responsibilities of a bomber pilot weighing on him. As they flew, the landscapes below painted a serene picture, untouched by the war that raged across oceans. It was a poignant contrast, the peace of the skies against the chaos of the world below. For a brief moment they found solace in this detachment, a fleeting escape from the harsh realities they would soon face. After several hours they returned to base, their landing smooth, a testament to their skill and hard work. The sense of achievement was palpable, not just for them but for the entire squadron who had shared in their journey. That evening, the mess hall was abuzz with stories of their flights, each tale a patch in the quilt of their shared experience. However, the celebration was short-lived. The news of escalating conflicts and losses abroad was a sobering reminder of their purpose. The United States, now fully engaged in the war, needed skilled pilots, and time was a luxury they did not have. The following weeks were a blur of advanced training. James and Thomas, along with their fellow pilots, were introduced to combat simulations, night flying, and formation tactics. The intensity of these exercises left little room for doubt or fear, their skills sharpened like blades, ready for battle. In these weeks, they also learned the value of teamwork. The bond between the pilots strengthened, each man aware that the success of their missions would depend not just on individual skill, but on their ability to work as a cohesive unit. Stories of ace pilots from the First World War were a frequent topic during their brief moments of rest, tales of bravery and skill that inspired and humbled them. As they neared the end of their training, their instructor, Lieutenant Davis, took them aside. "You have all shown remarkable progress," he said, his voice tinged with pride and seriousness. "But remember, in combat, it's not just about what you know or how well you fly. It's about making decisions under pressure, about protecting your fellow soldiers, about coming back alive." His words were a stark reminder of the stakes. They were not just pilots. They were soldiers in a war that demanded more than just courage and skill. The chapter closes with James and Thomas standing on the airfield, watching the sunset. The skies, once a realm of dreams, were now the theater of an imminent reality. They knew that the coming days would test them in ways they could hardly imagine, but they were ready to fly, to fight, and to uphold the values they held dear. The journey of the American pilots, their wings of bravery, was just beginning. The airbase was buzzing with activity as the early morning sun cast long shadows on the tarmac. Pilots, ground crew, and officers moved with a purposeful urgency, a dance choreographed by the demands of war. For James O'Connor and Thomas Bennett, this day marked the transition from training to active duty. They were no longer students of the sky. They were its guardians. As James strapped into his P-51 Mustang, he felt a weight unlike any he had experienced in training. This was no longer about perfecting maneuvers or impressing instructors. This was about real combat, where mistakes had dire consequences. He went through his pre-flight checklist with meticulous care, ensuring every system was functioning optimally. Beside him, Thomas prepared his B-17, the Flying Fortress, a behemoth of the skies. He felt a deep sense of responsibility, not just for the aircraft, but for the crew on board. As a bomber pilot, his role was crucial to the mission's success. The camaraderie amongst his crew was palpable, a bond forged in the fires of shared purpose and dedication. Their mission was a strategic bombing run over enemy territory, a task that held significant risks but was essential to weakening the enemy's war capability. The briefing room had been tense as the mission details were outlined, maps and charts covering the walls, the gravity of the task ahead evident in the somber faces of the men. As the squadron took off, the roar of engines filled the air, a powerful chorus that echoed the resolve of the men who piloted these machines. James's Mustang led the fighter escort, the sleek aircraft slicing through the air with agility and grace. Thomas's B-17, flanked by others, formed a formidable force, their presence in the sky a testament to the might of the Allied air power. The journey to the target was tense, the pilots acutely aware of the enemy fighters that could appear at any moment. James scanned the skies, his eyes sharp, his hands steady on the controls. The radio crackled with updates and instructions, a lifeline of communication in the vast expanse of the sky. As they neared the target, anti-aircraft fire greeted them, ominous puffs of smoke blooming in the sky. Thomas and his crew braced themselves, the B-17s beginning their bombing run, their payloads ready to be unleashed. The flak was intense, the sound of explosions and shrapnel hitting the aircraft a harsh reminder of the dangers they faced. James and the other fighter pilots weaved through the chaos, their focus on protecting the bombers. The sky erupted in a ballet of death and destruction, each pilot playing their part in this deadly dance. Then, enemy fighters appeared, fast and relentless. James found himself in a dogfight, his training kicking in, his movements instinctive and precise. The world narrowed to the cockpit, the enemy aircraft, and the endless sky. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he pursued the enemy fighter, every decision a matter of life and death. With skill and a bit of luck, he managed to land a critical hit, the enemy plane spiraling down. It was his first confirmed kill, a moment of victory overshadowed by the stark reality of what it meant. Meanwhile, Thomas's B-17 shuddered under the impact of flak, but he kept his focus, releasing the bombs over the target. The feeling of relief was immediate but short-lived, as the journey home was equally perilous. The aircraft bore the scars of the mission, a testament to the resilience of the crew and the machine. As they returned to base, the pilots were met with a mix of emotions. There was relief at having survived, sorrow for the loss of comrades, and a deep-seated realization that this was only the beginning. The debriefing was a blur, the exhaustion of the mission settling in, their minds still replaying the events of the day. That night, the mess hall was quieter, the reality of war settling in. The pilots shared their experiences, each story a thread in the tapestry of their shared journey. There was laughter and tears, the emotional release, a necessary part of processing what they had been through. James and Thomas sat together, their friendship a source of strength and comfort. "We did it," Thomas said, his voice a mix of pride and fatigue. "We really did it." James nodded, his thoughts on the friends they had lost, the enemies they had faced, and the uncertain future that lay ahead. As they retired to their bunks, the events of the day replayed in their minds. They were no longer the wide-eyed recruits who had stood in awe of the aircraft they now piloted. They were warriors of the sky, their destinies intertwined with the aircraft they flew and the war they fought. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new missions, but for tonight, they rested, their dreams filled with the endless skies they had claimed as their own. The journey of the American pilots, their wings of bravery, had truly begun. The rhythm of life at the airbase had become a blend of relentless training and missions that pushed the pilots to their limits. For James O'Connor and Thomas Bennett, each day brought new challenges, honing their skills and forging their resolve in the crucible of war. The initial missions had been a harsh introduction to the realities of aerial combat. James, piloting his P-51 Mustang, quickly learned the importance of vigilance and precision. The dogfights were intense, a deadly dance in the skies where every decision could mean the difference between life and death. He had become adept at reading his opponents, predicting their moves, and using the Mustang's agility to his advantage. Thomas, in his B-17, faced a different kind of trial. The bomber runs required unwavering focus, coordinating with his crew and navigating through enemy defenses. Each successful mission was a testament to their teamwork and the strategic importance of their role, but the losses were heavy and weighed on him. The faces of crew members who didn't return haunted his nights. It was during the Battle of Historical Battle, a significant and grueling campaign, that both pilots faced their sternest test yet. The mission was to disrupt enemy supply lines, a vital objective that could turn the tide in the Allies' favor. James and his squadron were tasked with providing fighter cover for the bombers. As they neared the target, they were ambushed by a swarm of enemy fighters. The sky erupted into chaos, the roar of engines and the staccato of gunfire filling the air. James found himself pursued by an enemy ace, a pilot whose skill matched his own. It was a harrowing duel, pushing James to the limits of his flying abilities. In a daring maneuver, he managed to outflank and disable the enemy aircraft, but not without sustaining damage to his own plane. Thomas and his crew, meanwhile, were running their bombing sortie under heavy fire. The flak was relentless, shaking the aircraft violently. Through gritted teeth and steady hands, Thomas kept the B-17 on course, allowing his bombardier to release their payload accurately. But the victory was bittersweet as they sustained significant damage, forcing them to make an emergency landing upon returning. The aftermath of the battle was a mix of relief and sorrow. The mission had been a success, but the cost was high. Several planes didn't return, and the pilots and crew who did were visibly shaken. For the first time, the full toll of the war was truly felt. In the debriefing room, the air was heavy with loss. They mourned their fallen comrades. Each name read aloud a somber reminder of the price they were paying. Yet, amidst the grief, there was a sense of determination. They were fighting for something greater than themselves, a cause that demanded their all. The days following the battle were a time for recovery and reflection. James spent hours in the hangar, helping the ground crew repair his damaged Mustang. It was a therapeutic process, a way to reconnect with the machine that had become an extension of himself. Thomas, meanwhile, visited the infirmary, sitting beside crew members who had been injured. Their resilience and optimism, despite their wounds, bolstered his spirits. It was a stark reminder of the human element in the machinery of war. As they returned to the skies, new challenges awaited. The enemy was adapting, employing new tactics and technologies. The pilots had to be constantly learning, evolving to stay ahead. It wasn't just about flying anymore. It was about being one step ahead in a deadly game of chess. One mission stood out during this period. An Allied ground unit had been pinned down, and air support was critical to their survival. James's squadron was called in to provide close air support, a dangerous but necessary endeavor. Flying low and fast, they strafed enemy positions, providing the cover needed for the ground troops to regroup and counterattack. James's heart raced as he flew through a hail of gunfire. The lines between bravery and recklessness blurred in the heat of the moment. Simultaneously, Thomas participated in a daring nighttime bombing raid on an enemy fuel depot. The darkness added an extra layer of danger, but the mission would cut off a vital resource for the enemy. Navigating by starlight and intuition, Thomas and his crew delivered their payload with precision, a blow to the enemy's war machine. Through these trials by fire, James and Thomas grew not just as pilots but as leaders. They had seen the best and worst of humanity, experienced fear and courage in equal measure. The bond between them and with their fellow pilots had deepened into a brotherhood. They shared stories, supported each other through losses, and celebrated victories, however small. As this chapter of their journey closed, they stood on the airfield looking up at the stars. The war was far from over, but they were no longer the inexperienced recruits who had gazed at these skies with naive wonder. They were warriors, shaped by the trials they had endured, ready to face whatever the future held. Their story was one of many in the tapestry of the war, each thread a testament to the human spirit's resilience and capacity for heroism in the face of overwhelming odds. The wings of bravery they wore were not just a symbol of their skill as pilots, but of their journey through the trials by fire. As the war progressed, the landscape of conflict evolved, bringing new challenges and shifting the roles of James O'Connor and Thomas Bennett. They had become seasoned pilots, their experiences in the skies over Europe etching a profound impact on their lives. The midpoint of the war saw significant advancements in aviation technology. New aircraft models with enhanced capabilities were introduced, and James found himself training on the latest P-51D Mustang. Its superior range and firepower were game changers, allowing for more effective escort missions deep into enemy territory. Thomas, too, saw upgrades in the B-17S, with improved defensive armaments and more sophisticated navigation equipment. These advancements, while welcome, also came with the need for continuous learning and adaptation. With the tide of war slowly turning, James's role expanded from purely escort duties to more offensive operations. He participated in daring fighter sweeps, designed to seek out and destroy enemy aircraft before they could engage Allied bombers. These missions were risky, but they demonstrated the growing dominance of the Allied air forces. Thomas's missions also shifted focus. The strategic bombing campaign intensified, targeting key industrial and military sites. The stakes were higher, and the pressure to deliver precision strikes was immense. Each mission was a delicate balance of risk and necessity, the moral implications of bombing weighing heavily on his conscience. The relentless pace of missions took its toll. Fatigue became a constant companion, and the losses continued to mount. The faces of friends who didn't return haunted the pilots. There were moments of doubt and despair, but these were countered by a deep-seated resolve to see the fight through to the end. James experienced a close call during one intense dogfight. A burst of enemy fire damaged his Mustang, and he barely managed to limp back to base. The experience shook him, the reality of his own mortality hitting hard. Yet it also reinforced his determination to be the best pilot he could be, not just for his own survival, but for his comrades who relied on him. Thomas, after a particularly harrowing mission where his B-17 barely made it back, experienced a similar reckoning. The responsibility for his crew weighed heavily on him, each decision in the air a burden he willingly shouldered. Amidst the chaos of war, there were brief moments of respite. On leave, James and Thomas would visit nearby towns, trying to find some semblance of normalcy. They met people who, despite the hardships of war, showed incredible resilience and generosity. These encounters provided a glimpse into the lives they were fighting to protect, and a reminder of what awaited them after the war. Back at the base, the camaraderie among the pilots remained a source of strength. They shared stories, played cards, and listened to music, a brief escape from the realities outside the barracks. As they returned to duty, there was a noticeable change in both James and Thomas. They had matured, no longer the youthful pilots who had eagerly signed up. War had hardened them, but it had also deepened their understanding of duty, sacrifice, and the complexities of human conflict. Their leadership roles within their respective squadrons had grown. Younger pilots looked up to them, seeking guidance and inspiration. James, with his natural charisma, motivated his fellow fighters with stories of their successes, instilling confidence and pride. Thomas, with his calm and thoughtful demeanor, provided a steadying influence, his experience invaluable to the newer members of the bomber crews. As the chapter concludes, both James and Thomas are reflective. They ponder the impact of their actions, the lives saved, and the enemy's capabilities diminished. They understand that their contributions, along with those of countless others, are shaping the course of the war. The airfield, once a place of daunting unknowns, had become a familiar home. The roar of engines, the smell of aviation fuel, and the sight of aircraft taking off against the backdrop of a war-torn sky were now part of their existence. Their journey had taken them far from the young men who had eagerly signed up to fly. They had witnessed the best and worst of humanity, experienced loss and triumph, fear and courage. Through it all, they had remained committed to their cause, their wings of bravery not just a symbol of their role as pilots, but a testament to their journey through the turning tide of World War II. As the war entered its final decisive phase, James O'Connor and Thomas Bennett had become embodiments of the heroism and resilience of the Allied air forces. Their reputations as skilled pilots had grown, each mission adding to the legacy they were creating. James, now a seasoned fighter pilot, had several notable engagements that bolstered his status as an ace. One particular mission stood out when his squadron encountered a large formation of enemy fighters. In a tense and skillful dogfight, James managed to down 3 enemy aircraft. His actions not only protected the bomber squadron they were escorting, but also significantly disrupted the enemy's plans. This feat was talked about back at the base for weeks, becoming a part of the squadron's lore. Thomas, in his role as a bomber pilot, led a critical mission targeting an enemy ammunition depot. The success of this mission would hinder the enemy's ability to supply its frontline units. Navigating through fierce anti-aircraft fire and enemy fighters, Thomas and his crew delivered the bombs with precision. The successful destruction of the depot dealt a significant blow to the enemy, earning Thomas commendations for his leadership and bravery. However, these victories did not come without cost. Both James and Thomas faced moments where the thin line between life and death was palpably felt. James narrowly escaped death when his aircraft was severely damaged during an intense battle. His skillful flying and sheer will to survive enabled him to make an emergency landing in enemy territory, from where he evaded capture and made a harrowing journey back to Allied lines. Thomas experienced a similar brush with mortality when his B-17 was hit by enemy fire, losing 2 engines. With calm determination, he managed to keep the plane steady enough for his crew to bail out safely before heroically crash landing the plane in a field. His actions saved the lives of his crew and exemplified the selflessness at the heart of his duty. These acts of heroism did not go unrecognized. James and Thomas were awarded medals for their valor, their names becoming synonymous with courage and determination. But the recognition was bittersweet. They accepted the honors not just for themselves but in memory of those who had fallen, their victories overshadowed by the loss of friends and comrades. In the quieter moments, away from the celebrations and commendations, both pilots reflected on their journey. They thought about the young men they once were, full of ideals and dreams, now transformed by the realities of war. The innocence they had lost was replaced by a deeper understanding of the world and their place in it. Their achievements were more than personal triumphs. They were significant contributions to the Allied war effort. James's prowess in the air had disrupted numerous enemy operations, while Thomas's successful bombing missions had weakened critical enemy infrastructure. They had become key players in the larger strategy that was gradually turning the tide of the war in favor of the Allies. As the chapter nears its end, the focus shifts to the bond between James, Thomas, and their fellow pilots. They had become a band of brothers, united by shared experiences and a common purpose. The mess hall was filled with their stories, laughter mingling with solemn toasts to fallen comrades. These moments of camaraderie were essential, providing a semblance of normalcy and a reminder of the humanity they were fighting to preserve. The chapter closes on an introspective note. James and Thomas, along with their fellow pilots, stood on the airfield watching a formation of planes flying overhead. They were a symbol of the progress made, a testament to the sacrifices endured and a beacon of hope for the future. Their stories, etched in the annals of the war, would be told for generations to come. They were more than pilots. They were heroes who had soared into the annals of history on their wings of bravery. As the sun set on the airfield, casting long shadows on the planes they had flown, James and Thomas understood that their legacy would live on, not just in the medals and accolades, but in the freedom they had fought so valiantly to protect. As World War II drew to a close, the airfields that had once been hives of ceaseless activity began to quiet down. For James O'Connor and Thomas Bennett, like so many others, the end of the war was a time of complex emotions, relief, sorrow, and reflection on their experiences. The journey back home was filled with introspection. James and Thomas, once eager to join the war, were now returning as changed men. The war had sculpted them in its unyielding hands, leaving indelible marks. They were heroes in the eyes of their country, but within, they each carried the weight of memories, both triumphant and tragic. Reintegration into civilian life was a challenge. The fanfare of their return eventually faded, leaving them to grapple with the normalcy of a life far removed from the adrenaline and intensity of aerial combat. James found solace in flying, becoming a test pilot, using the skills honed in war for the advancement of peacetime aviation. Thomas, on the other hand, returned to college, pursuing a degree in engineering, a nod to the technical skills and appreciation for machinery he had developed during the war. In the quiet moments, their thoughts often drifted back to the skies over Europe. They remembered the comrades they had lost, the missions that had tested their limits, and the sense of purpose that had driven them. The medals and commendations they received were not just symbols of honor, but reminders of the sacrifices made by so many. Their experiences had a profound impact on their perspectives. They became advocates for veterans, understanding firsthand the challenges faced by those returning from war. They participated in speaking engagements, sharing their stories not for glory, but to ensure that the lessons of the war were not forgotten. The bond they shared with their fellow pilots remained unbroken. Reunions were frequent, a chance to relive the camaraderie of their youth. These gatherings were filled with stories and laughter, but also moments of silence, honoring those who were no longer with them. As the years passed, James and Thomas watched the world change, shaped by the war they had fought in. They saw the rise of new conflicts, the evolution of technology, and the changing face of global politics. Their experiences in the war lent them a unique perspective on these changes, a deep understanding of the cost of freedom and the importance of striving for peace. In their later years, they became involved in education, speaking to new generations about their experiences. They emphasized the importance of history in understanding the present and shaping the future. They taught not just about the tactics and machines of war, but about the human element, the values of courage, sacrifice, and resilience. As the sun set on a quiet evening, James and Thomas, now old men, stood once more at an airfield, watching a vintage P-51 Mustang and a B-17 take to the skies in a commemorative flight. They watched in silence, each lost in their thoughts. For them, the planes were more than just machines. They were keepers of memories, symbols of a time when they, as young men, had soared on wings of bravery. They remembered the feeling of the controls in their hands, the hum of the engines, and the boundless sky that had been their domain. The chapter and the story conclude with James and Thomas looking up at the sky, their legacy secure in the annals of history. They were part of a generation that had faced unimaginable challenges, a generation that had risen to meet those challenges with bravery and determination. Their story, a tapestry woven from the threads of war, heroism, and sacrifice, was a testament to the enduring spirit of those who fight for freedom. It was a story that would continue to be told, a reminder of the cost of peace and the enduring value of bravery. As the aircraft vanished into the horizon, James and Thomas turned and walked away, their steps slow but steady, their legacy indelibly etched into the fabric of history, their story a timeless echo of the wings of bravery.